After 5 years of creating exciting business content with amazing businesses from around the world, Savvy is now creating a new video series entitled Heartbeat of the World. This series will feature experts from around the globe. We will highlight and discuss some of the greatest challenges facing the U.S. and the world. Co-create with us and find out more at bit.ly/savvypatron. Our guest today is Louisiana District 77 State Representative candidate and retired Colonel Rob Maness. He has had a lifelong record of providing dedicated service to our nation. Having worked his way up from enlisted ranks to full bird colonel, he retired from active duty in 2011, ending his military service of over 32 years. Following his military retirement, Rob returned to Louisiana to work as an executive in a Fortune 500 energy company. He is currently the owner of Iron Liberty. Today, Rob enlightens and shares with our audience his wisdom on the past and current state of the Middle East. To find out more about Rob, visit his website at robmaness.com. Hi, Rob. Welcome to Savvy Business Radio for our Heartbeat of the World series. I'm so grateful to have you out here today. How are you?
I'm doing great down here in southern Louisiana. We're getting a little rain today, which is always good. And we're having a fine day.
Well, fabulous. Are you near New Orleans? You are, right?
I am near New Orleans. I live on the north shore of Lake Pontchartrain in a little town called Madisonville.
Oh man, that's awesome. Me and my partner got to fly down there. He's a pilot, and we got to fly down Louisiana and go to New Orleans. It was an awesome flight. It was funny though, as we're flying down, we're coming down the levels, we was getting more and more muggy, and just before we landed, we're like, whoa, who kicked up the humidity?
We do live in the tropics down here.
Yeah, you certainly do. It's awesome. It was a wonderful trip. So it's great to have you here today. I think I told you before the interview that one of the things that came in from our Heartbeat of the World series, which is really touching on a lot of the things that concern our audience and the United States, is really the concern of what's going on in the Middle East, what's going on with Syria, and all of the concerns with our foreign policy. And a lot of the people wrote into us that we'd like to get a better handle on that. And Joshua, who sent us your details, and of course we heard you on Doc Green's show, we thought you'd be the perfect person to fill us in. But before we go to talking about all of that, share with our audience a little bit about your background and how you came to being a senator and working for the U.S. Air Force.
Well, I enlisted in the U.S. Air Force when I was 17 years old. I worked in the bomb disposal field until I finished college. And once I finished college, I was commissioned as an officer and started training as an aviator. I am a navigator, and I flew in 3 different platforms that I was qualified in the Air Force. The first was air refueling tankers. And that's how I came to Louisiana the first time. I'm an Air Force brat. So people ask me where I'm from. I have to go through a long story of where I was born and where my parents are from originally. But I'm from Louisiana because I've spent more of my life here than anywhere else in the world. So I flew in tankers and eventually got selected to go fly in the B-1 bomber, which has been in the news in the last 24 hours, I believe. Yes. And had the awesome opportunity to command a flying squadron in the B-1 and was able to have a staff job at the Joint Staff at the Pentagon in nuclear operations. Part of our task was to write parts of the Nuclear Decision Handbook. You all know it as the nuclear football. It's carried with the president all the time. But also after 9/11, I was in the Pentagon on 9/11. I was given the opportunity to help plan the response and identify who the enemy was, those kind of things. Eventually went back to fly and took command of a B-1 squadron and then took them to fight the war.
So during 9/11, you were there in the Pentagon during the attack and everything.
Yes, I was. And you can go to my website at robmaness.com, robmaness.com. There's a little video on that about my wife and I's experience that day on the website. And there's also a short clip from Fox News Sunday show where Army Lieutenant Colonel retired and state senator from Texas, Brian Birdwell, and I are on there because he and I interacted that day. I helped as one of the people that helped save his life. Brian was the most injured person that lived from the attack on the Pentagon, and he's a great human being. And we're reconnected last summer by, of all people, Governor Rick Perry. That's another story in and of itself. But yeah, it was a terrible day, but really from an American perspective and a person in the military's perspective, an awesome response to a ideology that is just ruthless, barbaric, and counter to everything that we in the United States hold dear, regardless of your political positions.
You know what's so interesting, Rob? When this first all happened after 9/11, I was concerned, and right after the attack, I was working at AP, the Associated Press, and we were all shocked, and we were watching the TV, even though we had screens everywhere. We actually had people, immediately dispatched down there and all that. I worked in accounting, but my boss came over and said, "Why are you crying?" And I said, "Because this is just the beginning." I knew at that point, because of the attack, we were going to go to war, and it was probably not going to be a quick war. I didn't know much about the Middle East at the time. I don't know much about it right now, honestly, but I knew this was going to result in a war and a lot more dead Americans and overseas people as well. Later on, probably a couple months down the line, my boss said, "Well, this is really a spiritual fight." And he said, for the Middle Easterners, this is this is their spiritual beliefs. They want us dead. And this comes from a spiritual core for them. Not for us so much, but for them. And I thought he was kind of nuts. What's your take on all that? Because you've actually served in the Middle East and you've witnessed the Middle Eastern culture. Is this more of a spiritual war? How is it for them?
Well, it's even difficult to classify it the way you did as a Middle Eastern culture, because there are multiple cultures in the Middle East. But I can tell you that the foundation of the Islamist form of the Muslim religion, I call it Islamist because the Islamist form and the foundation are the religion. I try not to use the word radical Islamic terrorism because it's not really radical. It's part of the fundamental foundation of the Islamist view of the religion itself. And that religion has some great reformations that need to occur in it before it can be compatible with Western civilization. So, when we look at the individuals and the groups that performed the attack and the target study and those kind of things on the United States for the 9/11 attacks, and even attacks before that and after, when you look at that group, regardless of what you name it today, you can name it the Islamic State, Al Qaeda, all sorts of names are given to it. I just call it the Islamic State now because it's declared itself a state. It does have some territory left, but we are defeating it on its territory. But the Islamic State is the fundamental Islamist view of the Muslim religion, and their goal is to really to kill people that are non-believers, or to get them to pay whatever fines they must pay, or to convert. And in its most virulent forms, they actually, when you saw I believe it was the mall attack in it was Kenya not that long ago, they literally took people out and asked them if they were Christians or not, told them they needed to convert, and if they said no, they killed them right there on the spot. And they've done this many, many times in their different acts of barbarism in the Middle East and Northern Africa.
Wow. And it's interesting because I've talked to more leftist thinking people here, and they're like, well, everyone has their religious beliefs and they're not bringing it here. That's just a few bad apples. I'm like, I don't think so. If it's the core of their actual belief system, it's not just then a few bad apples. It's a bunch of people perhaps not following the core beliefs. But even if, I don't know how much, I think, 1 billion around the world in Muslims. And even if 1% of 1 billion, that's still a good portion of people that want the rest of the world, Western ideals, wiped off the planet. And that's a pretty dangerous proposition.
Yeah, it's really about 25% of all Muslims practice the Islamist form of the religion. And again, that's the fundamental form. That is the foundational approach. They adhere to what's called Sharia law. Sharia law is not the practice of a religion. It's not like you can't compare it to something like like Hebrew law, the types of food and those kind of things. Although the left-leaning folks in the United States that really have failed in their constituencies to understand what's really happening, they like to bring things like the halal food system and those kind of things in and say that's just Sharia law. It's all just practicing a religion. They don't mean any harm to anybody, but that's incorrect. That's an incorrect view of it. The Islamist view is that Sharia law combined with the books, the Quran, the Hadith, and there are others depending on which sect you're in. All of those combine to form a political religious system of governance. And that is completely contrary to Western civilization, and especially contrary to the United States. Of course, our foundational view from the principles of the Declaration of Independence are that everybody has a natural right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Freedom of religion is included in those natural rights. Freedom from religion is also included as part of that natural right. And I think that's where some folks on the left in our country get the term separation of church and state, which is really incorrect too, and taken out of context from a letter from Thomas Jefferson to a Baptist church way back when. But some folks believe that way, and that's their right to do that. But all of us have the fundamental knowledge that the government shouldn't run religion. Yeah. And that is one of the foundational and fundamental differences, and why you can't just look at the Islamists and the Muslim community as just a religion, because it's really a theocratic system of governance that invades every aspect of your life. And it applies to non-believers in that society too. And a system like, say, the Southern Baptists, which is what I am, our system doesn't apply to non-believers from a religious perspective, except for we want to make sure we get the message out and give them an opportunity to make their own choice, an educated choice. That's totally the opposite of what the Islamists believe. And that's why non-believers tend to get barbarically killed because they're not considered full citizens under Islam. They're considered property, unclean, and those kind of things. And the law is written that way for as far as punishments go and how they're treated.
And it's interesting to me, Rob, because I've looked at what's going on all over the world, and it's really interesting. As the past years, I've seen a big uprise of Muslims moving into different countries in Europe, and kind of the culture changing, and not for the good. And then also a lot of instability in the Middle East. Has this come about due to the direction we've taken in the Middle East, or is there a lot of complicated things kind of meshing together that have caused this?
Well, one of the issues that's caused it, really, in my opinion, is unnecessary interventions by the United States and by the West. Libya is the one that stands out the most. It was joined in by the United States and NATO. And we did not take control of the ground. We did not help the folks enough that did take control. And some of the groups that we did help ended up being Islamist groups. And that is one of the keys to really the unlocking of the disaster that's what's occurring in the Middle East today, with the Islamic State gaining territory, having to be cleaned out of towns like Mosul, which has taken months and months, not weeks like it would if the United States forces were actually on the ground in full force over there. And it's complicated the situation because in the 8 years of the Obama administration, the Iranians were encouraged and allowed to come into Iraq much more aggressively and enforce and influence their armed forces and their government. And they're also allied with the Russians and the Syrian government against the forces that are in the civil war in Syria, which are also made up of many of them are Islamic State groups, but there are also groups that fight against the Islamic State. And then there are forces on our side that we've aligned with that some of them have been and could even be Al-Qaeda, which attacked us on 9/11, Islamic State forces. And I believe that unnecessary intervention, first in Iraq, although hindsight's 20/20, it's hard to judge whether the president had good intel or not. I was part of the system then. I believe he had the best intel we could give him when he decided to go into Iraq. Although I didn't agree with fighting that war, but I was in the military and I had to do my job and those kind of things. But the situation that President Obama put us in when he summarily removed the 10,000 residual force troops that were there early in his administration created a vacuum that allowed Iran to come in, allowed these forces with the Islamic State to take territory, and they have taken a lot of territory in Iraq and eastern Syria, and so those groups they're very disparate. We have found ourselves wanting to work with the Russians to fight ISIS, but not work with the Russians to support Assad. We have found ourselves wanting to work with the Kurds from Iraq to fight ISIS because they're very good at it. But the Turks, our NATO ally, are also in conflict with some of the Kurdish forces that we want to help to fight ISIS, and have actually attacked them using NATO equipment and American forces. So you have this very complex set of issues going on the ground. And really it's come down to two things: the vacuum in power created by our intervention first in Iraq and then Libya throughout the Middle East. And then the strong, aggressive, virulent form of Islam that's determined to bring the West and Islam to a conflagration of a war to end all wars, to put it in a simple form.
That's intense. And I recall back after 9/11, I was a big proponent for not going to war in Afghanistan or Iraq. And most, the main reason for me is I heard that the people who are on the plane to, the hijackers were all living in cells in the United States. I'm like, well, let's hunt down those cells, infiltrate them, and bring them down and find out who they're working with. And I said, because dropping bombs in countries and later we have to go fix up, because we'll have to, fix up the country we bombed the heck out of. How is that going to help us? And I just saw it being a much more difficult situation. But I think it's much more complicated than I saw it back on 9/11. And now even more so because, a lot of folks, including me, were like, well, why can't we just leave them the heck alone and get the heck out of the Middle East, let them deal with their own crap? But now it's gotten to the point where if we just leave, it can make things even more unstable. It's not such a simple proposition of just leaving. But it's not that simple just to pull us all out, is it?
No, it's not that simple. And the drawdown in Afghanistan, first of all, I think the response in Afghanistan was necessary. The Taliban controlled the country. They were the enablers of the al-Qaeda forces that trained and developed there that attacked us. Now, there's some other issues that I have with our response. The Saudi Arabian government had some play, as we saw in the unredacted now 28 pages of the 9/11 Commission report, that there were some government officials that had some interaction with the terrorists from 9/11, and 15 of those terrorists were from Saudi Arabia originally. That's where their citizenship was. So there's some conflict there that we really haven't addressed well, in my opinion. But I think the initial response in the Afghanistan theater was a proper and appropriate response for us to defend ourselves. We have done some things since then that really I do not feel was appropriate, and as we discussed earlier, actually put the situation into a much darker and more difficult place than where it could have been at this point, coming up on 16 years after 9/11. And you're right, we can't just withdraw even from Afghanistan there, even though I believe we've been there too long. The way we've dealt with the last 10 years after the first few years of the war hasn't been helpful to the situation to make the Afghanistan government stronger and the Afghanistan people freer. And if we were just to withdraw the rest of our troops, it would create another vacuum and probably end in the disaster of the Taliban. And now we see evidence of Islamic State cells operating in Pakistan and eastern Afghanistan. So we can't just do that, because it would result in more American lives and Western lives being lost if we were to do that now. So we've got some difficult times coming up. I think the president has put Jim Mattis as a Secretary of Defense. He's exactly the right man at the right time for the United States defense. And I really like what I'm seeing from him so far. We're focused on combat lethality now and not not all this social engineering that the Obama administration was focused on, which hurts your combat readiness, and you don't ever want to intentionally hurt your combat readiness, especially while you're fighting a war. And we did two things during the Obama administration: sequester and the social engineering in the Department of Defense that's really damaged our combat readiness.
Now, what does that mean exactly? Social. What does that mean exactly?
In my view, there was an over focus on the removal of don't ask, don't tell, and now this transgender issue and those kind of things. It's too much focus on that because the military has been a system of success by merit for years and years and years. It was the first totally integrated government institution by Harry S. Truman from a racial perspective and a gender perspective came later on in the 1970s. So we, as professionals, we've done a very good job, even though we had don't ask, don't tell. There were those folks in the military that we knew had made their own personal choices, but they were doing a good job, and they had risen to command. Colonel Ginger Wallace, who sat in the State of the Union speech where President Obama announced the "Don't Ask, Don't Tell" repeal, sat next to Michelle Obama. I know her, and it was part of the system that selected her to command an Air Force squadron, and we didn't have any idea what her personal choices were. At least I didn't at the time, and she was selected based on her merit. So the United States Armed Forces have always worked that way, and to be overly focused at a time of war on those types of issues and combine that with the sequester budgets that cut the budget in operations and readiness accounts far too much. And Republicans are as guilty as everybody else on that because they agreed to that deal. So doing those two things has hurt our combat readiness to the point where we need to be very careful how we use our forces today and what we do get involved in from a military perspective and make really solid decisions. And I think Jim Maness is the right man to help the president do that.
Yes, absolutely. And it's sad because I think what the whole administration was is a big, big distraction. Look here, look there, look here, and then don't pay attention to anything that's really important to the safety and liberty of our country. And I find that quite sad. People will praise, oh, hail, Obama. And I'm like, have you all not opened with your eyes and seen what he's done? It's not been good stuff, boys and girls. But also you're right, because when we're combat ready, and meaning that we have armed forces ready to go out and fight, and we have enough money to do that, to keep them equipped. I heard that when we were in, during the Obama and even during the end of the Bush administration, some of the combat people over there didn't even have but one bottle to drink per water a day. What the heck is that? Our troops are not being taken care of? What the heck?
That's exactly
those
right.
Are boys and girls out there.
That's right. There are boys and girls and young men and women, really, and they're all volunteers, and on the social engineering thing, there's two sides to that. One is the issue of the individuals themselves. The other is things like religious liberty. We, at the same time that we're doing social engineering, people are being fired from leadership jobs because they have religious beliefs that go against what this policy is. And you have to fight for that too, because that's what America's all about, is fighting for the liberties and the rights that God or nature's God or nature gave us, which can't be changed by men and women. And that's what makes us different from the rest of the countries in the world. Most people that understand why this country was founded know that our rights can't be taken away by the government and the other Western civilization countries in the world. They believe the government gives rights, which means that they can take them away. We in America, if we people really understand and have been educated on the founding of this country, know for a fact it's not a belief system; it's knowledge that comes from Western civilization that the rights are given to us as human beings, and we have to fight for those, and we expect the government to protect them. Not try to establish new rights and those kind of things.
And the whole point of this is that we are really the government works for us, not the other way around. And I think that's kind of gotten confused that, the government's supposed to be giving us free welfare stuff and whatever. It's like, no, they're supposed to be there to guard the gates. That's about it. But really, there's there to be our servant. That's why it's called a public servant.
Yeah, and now we have a president, Donald Trump, who goes to a place like Poland, which was once an Eastern Bloc country, and the people of Poland have a better understanding of what we just talked about America and its foundation, and the human beings' natural rights and how they can't be changed by government than even Western European countries' citizens do. Over in the G20 meeting in Hamburg in Germany, after the president gave this great speech that was really the best speech I've ever seen. And Ronald Reagan was the first president I ever voted for. And I followed all of his speaking, was close to him in my job in bomb disposal because I helped protect him with the Secret Service and really admired him. But this president, if you look at his actions and listen to his words from that speech yesterday, he is even more all-American and more knowledgeable about how to communicate that than Reagan was. And he did a wonderful job in Poland the other day. And then we go to Hamburg, Germany, and you have New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio, the day that his police officer that was assassinated in cold blood by an individual, we don't even know what his background is yet, gets on a plane and goes to join the protesters against capitalism in Hamburg. Where the G20 is, and they're getting violent and burning cars all over the place and smashing up businesses and those kind of things. And like I said, some people don't really understand, even in our own country, don't have a really good knowledge of what America is all about. Mr. de Blasio is one of them. You can see it by their actions.
And what's very scary to me, Rob, is really all the distraction that's been brought about for several years, even during Bush. And it's really been brought about by the media, the mainstream media, helping to create all of these little distractions. And I recall even 20 years ago, I stopped picking up the paper when the O.J. Simpson case came about. And they were playing it every single day and, making big spectacle of it. And then, what was it, Joey Fisher and this other Amy Fisher and Joey Buttafuoco, whatever. Yeah. And I was like, okay, that's it. I'm never picking up another newspaper. It's all garbage. But some people live vicariously and take all of this stuff as fact. They don't, look at it themselves. And with the internet today, we're so blessed that we can go get the resources ourselves, find out what's really going on around the world. I tell people about the Middle Eastern issues. You don't have to take whatever my experts say on my show, per se. You can go all over the internet and hear citizens around the world tell you straight up what's happening in their own backyard and show you a video of it. It's no longer a reason for anyone on the planet to be ignorant.
That's right.
So right now, I feel like one of the things that's most harmful to the United States and our liberty is really the distractions created by the mainstream media. What do you see as the biggest concern for our liberty in the United States?
Well, I believe that I call it the fake news, just like Mr. Trump does. Matter of fact, I've created an entire, I've shifted my small business from consulting to digital media and publishing digital media, and even a radio show called Iron Liberty News is what we call our digital media and radio operation. And our thing is that we take fake news stories for the week and we analyze them and we put out the truth. Because that is one of the largest attacks on liberty, American liberty, that has ever occurred. Now, we've always had news entities take sides and those kind of things, but they've always been, up to this point in our history, it's always been known if there was a biased news agency or news media outlet and those kind of things. They've been pretty upfront about it. But now you have organizations like CNN, the fake news king and queen of them all, who says they're objective and they're the best, most reliable news source and those kind of things. And you cannot rely on anything that they say on the channel anymore. I mean, just look at, they made a big deal out of Melania Trump the Prime Minister's wife, Poland, not shaking hands with Melania Trump, and it just wasn't true.
They didn't show the whole video.
It was fake. It was fake. And they edited the video. We call that in the military propaganda and an influence operation. And that's what CNN and the New York Times, the Washington Post, they're on a giant influence operation to influence the American people to hate the Trump administration and what it stands for. But I would encourage everybody, no matter what party you're in or what persuasion you are ideologically, but as Americans, go back and read for the president's speech from the other day. That's why I was able to vote for him, even though I didn't support him in the primaries. I supported somebody else, you know. But he's proven. And if you look at his record, I talked to a friend of mine that's a professor of law at Liberty University last week, and he said if you really look at his record, and neither one of us supported Mr. Trump in the primaries, if you look at his record, he's more conservative than any Republican president that we've ever had, including Ronald Reagan. Mm-hmm. So let's give it a chance, not just from a conservative perspective, but from an American perspective. Everybody needs to open their minds up a little bit, especially on the left in this country, and take a really good look at this man and his administration. I think they're trying to do good things by America, not from a partisan approach like we've seen the last 8 years, and maybe some people thought we saw the 8 years before that, but from an American perspective. And we haven't had a president like that in a long, long time.
We certainly haven't, and I voted for Trump. I'm very proud to have him as our president. God bless Trump and his family. But what I found sad is I lost some good friends because of it. And in New York, I live right here in the good old Apple, and it's super, super left thinking. I don't have a problem with that. I've had friends who are, leftist kind of thinking. I'm more conservative. We've never had strife until this whole election, and it was all brought about by the wonderful fake media, as you said. And it's amazing. I had friends saying, well, Trump was on TV yesterday giving the Hail Hitler sign, telling everyone to do this. I said, okay, you're probably looking out of context, and they probably peppered it with some context telling you what to think about that image they showed you, and then said, look at this, he's telling everyone to do this. That is not what happened. I didn't see that particular post on that particular moment, but I can guarantee you he wasn't telling everyone to do the Heil Hitler thing. I said, you all need to go back and stop looking at them, contextualizing and telling you what to think about something. As I said, for each time he gets up there, Donald Trump, President Trump, and speaks, this is even during the primaries, I said, listen to the speech, download them, listen to read the transcript, listen to it without the talking heads telling you how to think about thing, and really get a sense of what's going on, because he is not against the United States. He is for liberty. He is not with the status quo. That is why both sides, both Republican GOP and both Democrats, are attacking him, because he's against the system that's been ongoing for a while and working us toward communism, which is not our founding principle. That is not what we're founded on. We're founded on liberty, not communism, not socialism.
Oh, you're absolutely right. I voted for him too in the general election, and before the election, we invited him down here to Louisiana. My campaign team. I was campaigning for the U.S. Senate at the time, and we paused our campaign during the floods down here, and we got a hold of his team and said, "Y'all, you need to get him down here, and you need to get him down here now." And I made my team, put my team at his disposal along with some other candidates, and they got down here, and that was the change, because Clinton didn't come, President Obama didn't even come, and we had a natural disaster of epic proportions during that flood of August of 2016, and the only leader in America that came down here was Vice President candidate Pence and presidential candidate Donald Trump. And when they did come down here, they talked to the people. They didn't go talk to the elites and all that stuff. They talked to the people in their houses that were flooded. They brought supplies that were badly needed. They talked to the first responders, the sheriffs, and the National Guardsmen and women that were actually out doing the job and protecting neighborhoods that had been just absolutely devastated. And that was a shift for me. When I saw them respond to that in such a way, I was like, yep, I'm glad we elected him as our candidate, and he's the man. I mean, he's doing the right things. He knows how to make decisions. I had suspected that, and I think this country is so much better for it. And the media and the left, they really need to really rethink what they're doing, because this is not just an approach like what they say was taken by the Republicans with President Obama and imposing every policy. This is about America and fixing the things that have been broken by big government, the attempts at socialism, and those kind of things. And if we don't fix them, we will be in trouble in the years to come. And you know that, because you know that socialism and communism and those kinds of things don't work. And I wish we could send all the lefties in this country to Venezuela for a week so they could see it firsthand.
Yeah, or North Korea, and go hang out with. Go hang out in North Korea and see how wonderful it is living in absolute communism or socialism, and come back here and say how great it is not having liberty. It's only because they have liberty that that they don't understand the absence of it.
I mean, even Obamacare, Republicans ought to be running pictures of Charlie Gard from the UK to advertise against Obamacare and government health care day in and day out, and they're not. They need to be speaking up. President Trump spoke up about little Charlie, whose parents have the resources to try an experimental treatment to save his life, and the government bureaucrats are trying to kill him. I mean, that's the kind of sick things that happen under socialism and communism and those types of totalitarian states.
Yeah. And what's interesting is the distraction of the so-called liberty that the leftists think they're fighting for, like getting to have abortions. And last I checked, murder is not a liberty. Getting to take your unborn child and pull it out of you ain't a liberty, as founded by our founding fathers. But they've distracted the leftist thinking people to thinking, well, that's your liberty. That will be stripped from you, and you won't be able to do that anymore. You'll go back 300 years as a woman. You won't be able to work anymore. You won't be able to be a leader anymore. I'm like, really? Seriously?
Yeah, and in order to have that position, they have to take a position that's the opposite of their position on climate change. They have to ignore the science. The scientific, and in this case of human life, the scientific fact that the human being is created at conception, and the unborn should, and in my mind, have the same human rights and right to life that a born American has, and that's why I've fought for unborn citizens' rights and those kind of things, because as government grows, it invades more and more of our lives. The ability for the government to take life increases. Whether it's benevolent, think-minded or not, it doesn't matter. The UK's socialized medicine approach to Charlie Gard is the exact reason why we should get as far away from that as possible, and in some cases even go back to more liberty, because more liberty ensures prosperity and less liberty ensures poverty. And Venezuela is the prime living example of that.
Yeah. What would be your take to anyone as far as how we could begin to repair the disarray in the Middle East and Syria and all that? What would you say would be our best option that we should take as a country towards all of those catastrophes happening over in the Middle East?
Well, as a military professional, I have to tell you that my view is that the Congress of the United States has not done the right thing. The right thing for them to do is put us on a general war footing, a declaration of war against the Islamic State. And give the generals and Secretary Maness the same ability and freedom of action that the generals had in World War II, and go at it. Go at it full force, because if we don't, more Americans will die over time, more Western civilization will die over time, and most importantly, Western civilization will be more and more threatened by the Islamists as that movement grows, because that movement attracts people, especially young people that are uneducated, even people from the United States of America that have all of the rights and privileges and opportunities that we have here have been brought into that as Islamic State fighters, and with a belief that they're the right system and that ours is not. So we need to take that approach, and we need to get it done now. And I wish our Congress had the courage to do that. I'm continually disappointed that they have not been able to get that job done. And until we get that job done and the American people's total might is put behind it, we'll continue with this little bit of this, little bit of that kind of thing, and we'll continue to get threatened by millennial dictators like Kim Jong-un from North Korea. And those kind of things until we do the right thing. And the right thing is to completely eliminate the Islamic State and that ideology from the face of the earth.
Yeah. And I don't think people understand that. They're like, well, everyone has a right to their religion. I said, you know what? People have the right to their own religion and their own ideology if it doesn't take away from the will and rights of another. And that's where the line is drawn. They want to eliminate anyone who doesn't think like them. make them not exist on this world. And that's a problem because I kind of want to keep existing. And as you just said, Rob, you mentioned kind of educating the young. When I was younger, I was in the Democratic Party. I thought socialism was pretty awesome because my perspective was, hey, socialism is taking care of the poor, looking out for your fellow man. What could be wrong with that, man? Yeah. And then as I grew older and started to look at what socialism turned out to be and how it worked out in the world, I was like, well, really it's enslaving the poor, not allowing them to, like when we give social benefits out and continually do that for families and not allow them a way to find a way out where they can build their own great life and take care of themselves.
That's exactly right. And unfortunately, socialism is attractive to people that don't have very much money and resources and are just starting out in life. If they really don't have a good foundation in our country of what the United States is all about, and I go back to natural rights and God-given rights of every human being. We have to start there, and it's very unfortunate that the Democrat Party has gone so left in the United States, and that even some in the Libertarian Party talk about things that take rights away from human beings as opposed to being more free, and missing the point that being more free means being more prosperous. Yes. Every single time. It's never really failed. The thing that has failed has been the approach they want us to take, which is more and more government involvement, more and more government control, and more taxes increasing and more tax dollars being used and spread around, which only creates more poverty. All you have to do is come down here to New Orleans. It's been controlled by Democrats for over 72 years. There's a guy named Mitch Landrieu that's pulled down veteran statues because he said they were a problem in the midst of the highest opioid fatality overdose rate we've ever seen, the highest murder rate in the country, even higher than Chicago. And all the 8 years of administration, he's underfunded police. He's cut the police force by a third. And he continues to do that. He just rolled out a climate change plan yesterday towards the end of his second and final term. And that's because the president's backed out of the Paris Climate Accords, which was a terrible thing for the people of the United States to have agreed to in the first place. And this guy is down here as a Democrat doing things and spending millions of dollars of scarce resources. And the lefties are trying to get him to run for president of the United States. And he's doing the exact opposite things that take care of the citizens of America and would help America grow and stay that shining city on the hill. We'll end up being a Venezuela, and it will be a disaster if we continue down those types of paths.
Yeah, it's really, really sad. And what I have to bring to light here is the idea of money. We talk a lot about on our business show about money. It's one of the top things people ask about, sales and money. Very important to run a business. But there's a conflict in a lot of people running businesses or being Americans in the United States thinking money equals evil. To love money is evil, perhaps, if you put it before all else, including God. But to actually make a prosperous life, prosperous doesn't mean how much money you have in the bank, is not evil. And to actually, if you're actually prosperous, you can give more, either of time or money to your causes. So what I realized, and I tell people this, Donald Trump has spent his life building, being a builder, making great things around the world, making buildings, and it's actually he's providing a value and he's getting paid for it. Now, what have all politicians that have been doing, that have been running for office? They don't build stuff, they take stuff, they tax the people. That's how they get paid. That's not building stuff, that's taking stuff. So we want to be builders. Builders create things and make the world better. So look at that. Let's all be builders. We can, build a better country and, build a better world. So before we go, I want everyone to find out how they can reach you, find out more about you. Let them know that.
Well, I'm glad you brought up career politicians versus the builder. I am not a career politician. I was a career military servant of the United States. And we have to fight against career politicians. I'm in a race right now for the state house. My state rep resigned a couple of weeks ago, and I've got a budding 27-year-old career politician and a 40-something-year-old career politician that are in the race with me, and I'm the only one that's never held elected office, and I'm the one that's right for my state. You can find out more about us at robmaness.com. robmaness.com, robmaness.com. And if you want to join the fight against fake news, you can sign up for Iron Liberty News at ironlibertynews.com. And you can look at all of our past radio broadcasts, and we're on the radio out of New Orleans at WGSO 990 AM, Monday nights, 7 to 9 p.m. Central Time. And we do have callers, so it's a great show. And we started the 1st of May, and it's going like gangbusters.
Awesome. I got to tune into that and listen. And it's been such a fabulous talk. And I thank you so much, General. Excuse me.
Thanks for the promotion.
I gave you a little promotion there.
All right. Thank you, Colonel Maness.
Sharing your wonderful wisdom and gifts here on Savvy Business Radio.
Thank you very much for having me. I hope to be back soon.
You're welcome.
Get ready for our 6th Annual Aviation Month on Savvy Business Radio. Here's an excerpt of our past interview with Dave Pasco of Live ATC. So why do you think that fear comes about? Do you think it's because it's very procedural and technical when it comes to ATC talk?
I think that's a little bit of it. I think there's also just a fear because when we start training as pilots, we're trained, you have to stay out of this airspace, and you can't go here, you can't go there, you have to be really careful. So there's a built-in fear I think we have already, and now we're talking to the person who's going to potentially yell at us, or at least that's our perception, that they're going to yell at us if we do anything wrong, if we go 2 degrees off of our heading or something like that. And, the reality is really quite different, really. I mean, they just want to help, and they want you to follow the rules. They're trying to keep you honest, and we're there to also keep them honest. So but there is just a built-in fear.
Yeah, and bottom line, air traffic control is really there to take care of the pilot community and keep them safe.
That's right.
So, yeah, I've gotten a lot better since I started listening to ATC with feeling more comfortable with my transmission. So thank you again. Let me ask you, what has been your greatest passion and why for what you do in your business and in life?
Well, my greatest passion is really doing things well and trying to focus on things that really make a difference. I guess I'm a little bit of a perfectionist, or I try to be, and then I try not to be because it can be distracting in itself. You can't get everything perfect in life, but trying to avoid distractions, which is really hard. There's so many interesting things to pursue in life, but nowhere near enough time to do everything. But I'd say doing things well and doing things that make a difference and trying to avoid things that don't make too much difference in the world. That's my passion.
Awesome. And, as you've gotten started, you told me briefly when we met at Oshkosh that you kind of started liveatc.net out of a passion for yourself, and you were getting your instrument rating and such. And then it just, grew from there. But, as you've gotten started, now it's become a full-grown business. What has been some of the struggles and challenges you've faced, and how did you overcome them?
Well, by far the biggest struggle is really to remain focused on your long-term strategy while you're running things day to day. And in a really small business like this, that's a real challenge. New opportunities can be very distracting, and they're not always in your best interest as a business owner. So the way to overcome this is to constantly be aware of where your time's going and navigate through all that. Basically, keeping your eye on the ball, as they say, and not losing sight of your goals. It's really easy to say, but really hard to do. So it just requires, I think, in my case, daily discipline. And you don't succeed every day. And sometimes you just have to say, all right, I'm going to get back on focus tomorrow because there was this interesting side thing to pursue today. Sometimes pursuing the interesting distractions isn't a total waste of time. Sometimes you go down a path exploring something or looking at an issue. It could be a technical issue. It could be a business thing. Sometimes it's a learning experience, and you get something out of it, even though there's not necessarily a short-term product that comes from it.
That's a good point you make there, because as I've gone on my road, I've only been open for business for the past year, but there's a number of networking events and speaking events I've spoken at and such, and some of the things I've done on the surface didn't seem like, well, maybe I shouldn't have done that. It was really not my best interest of the company, but then, then several months later, someone I met at that event will be someone who is pertinent to my business. So you never quite know sometimes the actions you're taking, how they're going to turn out and how they could positively affect your business.
No, and that's correct. And you absolutely have to do a lot of those things, especially when it comes to networking and meeting other people. And you really never know when a contact might be useful, both for yourself or maybe for that other person. There's a certain amount of giving back as well in business, and getting peer feedback from people, if nothing else. So it's not all bad. Distractions are not all bad.
Yeah, that's completely true. Now, liveatc.net, it's an amazing service. When it first came out and you first founded it, how long did it take before, it just exploded? Because I think when we first spoke, it sounded to me like it just went off like fireweed, like almost from the get-go.
It started growing pretty fast from the get-go. The thing, I think, in more recent years, since at least 2009 when we came out on the iPhone, I think that's helped kind of accelerate the awareness. When we were just a website and really just on the web and only available through a web browser or your iTunes or audio player, still had a big audience, but now it's a more tuned in audience because mobile has become by far the most important platform for us, like a lot of other businesses that are involved in streaming audio. So, but it wasn't super fast early on. I would say in 2003 we had a handful of feeds and started adding them pretty quickly, but the rate of growth, it really took a year or two for it to really kick in. It was just sort of slow but steady organic growth for the first couple of years.
That's also, I'm glad you mentioned that as well, because some of the newer business owners I speak to seem to have the incorrect assessment that, they should be getting out of the gate and making mad money from day one. And the matter of the case is that the most successful businesses took time to organically grew, as you said, and then over time became great successes, but nothing is built overnight.
Yeah, that's absolutely true, and I can absolutely say, having worked in a number of other businesses as well, that nothing grows overnight. It takes a lot of care and feeding and focus, and if your goal is to really make a lot of money and be successful that way, then that takes a lot of work. And
I was also impressed that you are now international. Is that correct?
Yeah, we actually were international pretty early on. That was one of the things that really, I think, helped. There's a lot of aviation enthusiasts really all over the world, and they're concentrated in some of the bigger population areas. But yeah, we've been international since pretty early on.
Wow, that's awesome. And as you've gone through your journey in building liveatc.net and other businesses in the past, have you had any role models that have really inspired you along your path?
Yeah, that's always a tough one. But as I think about it, really, a couple of people come to mind. One was a guy named Jack Little, who probably not too many people know, but he is the president and CEO of a company called the MathWorks, which is based in Natick, Mass. I worked there for a number of years, and Jack really showed me a whole lot about how to really run a business in every sense of the word, from how to focus on hiring and hiring the right people to really operating all aspects of a business. So he was definitely one, and remember a lot of those lessons that I learned there. And the other one, really, and this is a little bit of a cliche, I guess, but Steve Jobs has always been kind of a hero of mine. And mainly for showing that insisting and focusing on perfection can really yield some dividends, down the road. But not accepting something that's substandard. So those two are definitely two of my role models that I can point back to as having an influence on me.
I like what you mentioned about not accepting substandard, because I heard a recent broadcast where someone had mentioned in the broadcast that they are continually going from place to place, whether it be a store or calling the phone company for a bill problem, that companies in general have gotten used to just enough. Let's just get enough done to help the customer. Let's just not go too far. And so he said, when has enough become enough? And actually, I think it was Michael Combs. Yeah, it was Michael Cohn's podcast, actually. And I heard that podcast, and I thought, he's so right. When has our society become enough as an, let's just do enough to get by? And that's a sad state.
Yeah, that's definitely one of my pet. I would say if you want to talk about pet peeves, it's one of my pet peeves, and I think it's part of how a country, a business, people can lose their way because it's a slippery slope really to nowhere, in my opinion. Doing something well is worth doing, and sometimes people will tell you, well, it costs a lot of money to do things well. It's impossible to do things well because there's only so many hours in a day. Well, it's easy to say that. It's easy to get caught in that trap. But the cost of not doing things well is, in my opinion, far greater than the extra cost and the extra time that you have to put in and the sweat equity that you have to put in, especially when you're growing a business or doing anything, just doing your job. Even if you're not a business owner, even if you're just an individual contributor at a business, doing whatever you do really well, if everybody did that, every business would succeed. And I think that's the truth. I really think that's the truth.
No, I agree.
Maybe not every business, but way more businesses would succeed than succeed today if that were the way we all approached everything we do.
And wouldn't it give everyone a great sense of how do you say it, of being at the end of the day? Like when you finished your week on Friday, you could be excited, not because it's Friday again, but because I completed a great week's work.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And, I was thinking, and because you mentioned that your first role model really inspired you to think about, business lessons and such. Is there one in particular biggest business lesson that you've learned over the years that you'd like to share, perhaps?
The biggest business lesson in terms of just growing a business, you mean, or?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would say that one of the biggest lessons that I've learned is that you really have to look at all aspects of a business. It's not, you can't just look at one dimension, and being able to get that a little more 360-degree view of every piece of your business is really important. Sometimes people who start a business are, laser focused on just technology or just whatever their area happens to be, finance or whatever. But really getting and understanding all aspects of your business, I think, is a lesson that every business owner could learn. You have to know enough, especially if you're going to hire other people to run pieces of your business or aspects of the business. You need to understand enough about each of those areas to really understand your business, and I think that's an important lesson.
Oh, it is. Thank you for sharing that. So as we go forward, what has been so far your greatest successes you've accomplished in your personal life and in your business?
Well, I would say in my personal life, it was one of the biggest ones was getting my pilot's license. That's something that I, as a kid, used to stare at airplanes going over the fence at Philadelphia International Airport, but never ever thought that that was something I might be able to do ever in my life. So that was a big one for me. The other one that really has been important to me is riding the Maness Challenge, which is a 165-mile two-day bicycle ride out in Massachusetts.
Wow.
That I've done that twice now to raise money for cancer research and treatment, and that's something that I have always wanted to do and never really got the motivation to do it. And a couple of years ago, I decided, it was time to take that challenge and do it and train for it. And I'm happy to say that I've done it twice now, and hopefully I'll do it every year, or mostly every year for the rest of my life. It's very, very satisfying. And
also great for your health as well.
Yeah, well, there's a side benefit, and that's I would be lying if I would say that that's not part of it.
Awesome. And you had mentioned that you were, one of your greatest things that you were able to accomplish was getting your pilot license. That is an amazing accomplishment. I have not yet reached it. I plan to one day. But what inspired you as a child to be interested in airplanes? Was there one defining moment that that happened, or?
Well, first of all, you'll have your pilot's license sooner than you think. You get there faster than you ever think you're going to get there. And I would say for me, the motivation or what inspired me to want to fly really happened somewhat later. I mean, I was always fascinated by airplanes, but I wasn't. And I think like a lot of kids, you hear an airplane and your face turns to the sky. I think anybody who loves planes is like that. Mm. But it wasn't like I really wanted to grow up and fly a fighter jet or anything like that. It always seemed like